Kerry Sexton, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming on the Self Selecting Podcast. You guys, thank you for listening. Welcome back. I would love to introduce you if you're not already familiar with Kerry. Kerry, would you tell listeners who aren't familiar with your content or really your career in the sport of bikini bodybuilding who you are? Just a little intro.
So I am Kerry Sexton. You can find me mainly on Instagram at Kerry Sexton underscore IFBB Pro. I'm a pro bikini athlete who turned pro in 2019 in Iceland. I did 6 shows in 8 weeks back then to get my qualification. And yeah, I've just been someone in the industry that's just always kind of wanted to be as open as I can be around the sport in sharing my highs, lows through the journey. I kind of use my page as more of like a personal blog. I write a lot of things to other people, however, like at myself as well. So yeah.
I love that. No, and I can definitely relate to almost treating your Instagram almost like a personal diary. Like, it is still a personal account. And I can say that's very much like why I started posting on Instagram to begin with. Like, it was very like, I want to motivate myself and have some accountability and also have essentially a paper trail so I can look back and be like, wow, like I consistently go through these same struggles,
Yeah.
albeit like in season, out of season. So it's amazing because like you do like as a fan of yours, like you put a lot of thought into your captions and you're very vulnerable while also being very classy, very fair to yourself and also fair to the sport. And I see that like it carries so heavily in your captions because I do feel like you have a very high degree of like personal accountability with like your emotions and the things that you go through and areas that you want to improve on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I've never really like looked at it in that way, I guess. You don't really when you just go about your day, posting about your day, do you really never think about like how people are reading it and the impact like it has on people. So yeah, I'm really happy to hear that from that side of things from yourself.
Something that I've seen and has been like a really big part of like your evolution has been the physical changes that you've made really the last couple of years, which are not insignificant. I mean, and for some, like they might chalk that up and be like, oh, yeah, she's added more muscle, but it's like to actually see the side by side comparisons and you're very, very transparent there. I think a lot of competitors underestimate like how much work that actually takes to make those physique improvements. And I kind of want to go into physically like your inventory, what you've done to your physique the last 2, 3 years as you've progressed within the IFBB.
For sure. So I think a big stepping stone for me over the last 2 years. So going back before that, like I do feel as though I can say I have made progress every single year, like without a doubt. But I would say more so over the last 2 years. Um, I'm 31 now, so I think that the longer you've been in the sport, but then throw your kind of age in there, and I think that helps with the like muscle maturity, the repetitions. Like I've literally been training since now 2016, so I think that obviously builds up. But I think one of the like defining things for me has been working alongside my current coach, and really delving into the understanding of me, especially on a hormone perspective. Finally, like finding out that I have PMDD, which was a big turning point because I had a lot of like naysayers back in the day, and then a lot of people that didn't understand, and even myself that didn't understand quite what this that I had and was going through like was. So it was never managed because I didn't even know what it was. They didn't even know what it was. So it was more like um, I never had like the amount of rest that I probably should have to help look after that through like changing my training volume, pulling it out, giving me time off. I would say over this last 2 years is probably the most like rested and the least I've been pushed, which is crazy because I've hit new levels of leanness. I've grown more. But it just goes to show how much of a difference, like actually understanding your body, your mindset, and actually putting that like into place when you are going through those like harder times, which do affect me for it is literally from around, so day 13, 14 of my cycle, is when I first get my symptoms of PMDD. And then around day 3 is when they go again. So the window of me being like normal Kerry is 10, 11 days every single month. And it is really, 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 really difficult. But that before like we kind of had a real pattern to this, I knew there was like a pattern, but I wasn't sure what it was. I literally thought I had like bipolar, or like I just did not know what was wrong with me. It was just crazy. So yeah, I think working with Meg and really getting the understanding of my mind, body, and everything has been such a game changer. Now, alongside that, when I first joined Meg, she told me that she wanted to see every single training video. So I was like, okay. So I first sent my training videos thinking like, yeah, like I know I train hard. So we have this thing, or Mark, my partner, who's IFBB pro as well, this thing called Kerry reps, where essentially he sees me going into this like different zone, so to speak. And I apparently can literally look like I'm just about to fail, and then the Kerry reps kick in and I start to go like above and beyond. So I've always known that I can train like hard, and I don't need someone to push me or anything like that. And I will literally, I remember I got an injury once because I had headphones in with a motivational speech like behind it. And it was when I used to train quads like back in the day, and I absolutely obliterated the set and ended up with an injury. So I was like, okay, I can never listen to motivational stuff during training because I will go like in. So that's quite funny. But with Meg, she, as much as I train hard, she re-looked at like my entire programming. I took certain exercises out because they hurt my lower back, or they hurt this, or they hurt that, when actually I was just performing them wrong. And I've been training since 2015, and I joined her, what, like 2 years ago. So it's like a long time to like think you're training correctly, you know? And it's obviously got me as far as it did, but I think the real level up then obviously came through like fine tuning, relearning, learning how to breathe, learning how to use my feet, and adding in other lifts and correctly bracing, and just a load of things like that, really. I think that's been one of the main turning points, and something I've really noticed with like my own clients as well, because I get them to send me training videos and I don't just give them feedback like, yeah, that looks good. It's like, okay, you need to breathe into your, even through your nose, like hold at this point, out through this point, tripod feet, like all stuff that's really like that they can learn. And I think as soon as you can learn and understand exactly why you're performing that movement, something unlocks and it becomes more than just pushing a weight from like A to B. And there's a massive thought process behind it. Using time under tension is hard. Most of my sets last like 2.5 to 3 minutes, every set. So but during that set, there's more time to think about what you are doing through that movement, because it's not just up, down, up, down. It's literally like, okay, foot's here, I'm feeling it through here as I'm coming back. So there's lots of thought process behind it. And I truly believe that's been one of the biggest turning points, to be honest, with my physique.
That is such a comprehensive answer, and it's so good, and it resonates so much with my own evolution, really, the last year or so with my own build phase. And it really does like speak to the fact that you can be lifting heavy, you can be technically performing movements with good time under tension, but if you don't have the ability to brace your core properly and you don't have the ability to identify bottlenecks within your positioning, so from the top down, like, is it the
Yep.
fact that don't have very stable you don't have very stable hips? Is it the fact that your pelvic stability just sucks because you're so used to wearing a waist trainer, you're so used to just
Yep.
sucking in because because of some kind of cognition of how you need to look while you're training, and really being able to fix this with my own training and get a very clear sense of where I need to be, similar to posing. It's like, it's very interesting. Is like, I should know at all times generally where my ribs should be, where my hips should be relative to my upper body, relative to the weight, and also then the amount of time spent during the set. Where I do see with a lot of clients that they're, and not just clients, myself too, it was almost this belief that like, I need to complete 12 to 15 reps. And the idea is just to get to completion, is just to do that amount of reps for the sake of doing that amount of reps, not really paying mind to what is the really like, what is the point in which either muscularly or technically the form is then breaking down, and why is that? And is that something that we need to spend more time working on the skill of, let's say, someone who is experiencing technical failure well before muscular failure? So
Yes.
I love hearing that. That's incredible. And I'm so happy for you. I want to circle back to the PMDD diagnosis, the support you've received with Meg. And I will say, like, I think this is something that's incredibly, I don't want to say common, but I would say overlooked, or just in our space, is something that many coaches will kind of, dust their hands clean and say, you know what, that's not my specialty. So let's just establish consistency across your cycle.
Yeah.
I guess for listeners, can you share, like, what is PMDD? What did that manifest for you like?
Yeah. So, what is PMDD and how do you fix it? I wish I knew that. But PMDD, so it's essentially, I thought before like it was my hormones that like were the issue. But actually it's the brain signaling. So like I've just had my blood work back, for example, and my hormones are like bang on. In fact, Meg was like, these are really, really good. Like, are you using femtest or anything? And I was like, no, like literally not. She was like, these are really good. However, right now, and I can actually say this like because this is how my day's been today. I messaged my boyfriend earlier and I generally said, so this is a bit of a like background and insight of what this actually is and what I go through every single month. I messaged him today and I said, I feel like a fraud. I've tried to write 2 Instagram captions over the last 2 days. I cannot do so. So I've not posted to Instagram. I said I'm meant to be on 2 podcasts today. How? How am I going to show up? At this time, I was in the gym and I walked out of the gym. And I haven't done that for about 2 years. But going off topic slightly, I've just been told that, and it's a funny one because it kind of circles back to training and how I used to train. I've got 3 bulging discs, which I've just been told, and now I have to have an MRI on my hips because something is very off in my hips. So the last 8 weeks, like 9 weeks post show, have been actually really difficult for me to like navigate from such a high and just running on like I don't even know what, to then like things have slowly kind of crashed. I think today that actually hit me, and especially with the time of the month. So I had to get back home today, and I had to go for a nap. I had to literally just sack everything off and go, if I can show up for these podcasts, I will show up. If I can't, I can't. And it's literally terrible. I asked him, how do you live with me? I asked him, what time are you going to the gym today? I'll stay out until you're gone because you don't need my negative energy. And he's like, it's not negative energy, like it's just something you're going through. And it's just like I'm totally out of my like right mind. And there's just like I messaged him and said, I don't know how I can live my life like this. Now the thing is with PMDD, we have actually tried like a lot of things to help manage it. We've tried HRT, so progesterone, estrogen, like, and femtest, like everything in alignment, like, to try and keep the hormones instead of them fluctuating like more often than not, because that's what my brain can't handle, like the peaks and troughs at the different times essentially of your cycle. And I've tried that. I supplement with everything that's meant to try and help it, from saffron to calcium to injectable glutathione, like absolutely so many things. Chase tree, vitamin vitamin D, like B, like absolutely everything you possibly can. If you saw my supplements and in the evening and in the morning, you would literally be mind blown, if I'm honest. All in a hope to try and get some sort of relief from it, but it just doesn't seem to be something that we've quite figured out. And it's really hard because I have quite a few people that come to me through what I share, who also, some of them say they have PMDD, and we do delve into things, and later on down the line we find out that it is endometriosis or PCOS or something like that, and it's not always PMDD. But these things are still, like you say, quite often something that a coach will just brush off. So I think it's given me a real good understanding on that, but it is really hard as well because, like, Meg's not managed to find a cure. She's not a doctor. I've tried going to the doctors. I've tried I've tried the coil. I've tried like HRT, like I said. Yeah, and the only thing I've really been told is a full hysterectomy, and I'm like, but I want a child. So even with the full hysterectomy, I've been told that as much as like an amputee, so they'll lose their arm and still have an itch. Apparently, that's a thing with having a hysterectomy as well, which was very insightful. So I kind of feel like I'm trapped sometimes in this, and it did leave me last year like wondering, can I continue this journey? Like, can I? And then my dad said something to me which really, it stays in my mind every day, to be honest, when I'm going through it. He said to me, okay, you prep, you have this. You're in off season, you have this. What are you going to do? You want to go to the Olympia? Like, are you going to just let that ruin it and then feel crappy anyway because you still got this thing that you can't essentially like fix right now? And I was like, you're right. So a lot of it, like I say, it's been managing me. Today, me walking out of the gym, it's like, okay, right, why did that happen? Okay, well, I'm literally 4 or 5 days away from my cycle. I went to physio yesterday, which was very like mentally taxing. My whole body aches. Should I have messaged Meg this morning and said how I feel for her then to feed back to me, knowing that I've had nightmares, a rubbish night's sleep, all this stuff that comes with PMDD? Yeah, should have just said that. So I've tried not to look at it how I did initially when I walked out and thought, no champion would like do that. No, no one would do that. Why am I doing it? If I've done it once because I've not done that in forever, am I setting myself up to do that again and again and again? All these questions. So as you can hear, it's quite complex and hard.
I just want to say I thank you so much for being as vulnerable as you are surrounding this topic, because I do think that regardless of if someone has been diagnosed with PMDD, endometritis, PCOS, or just experiences dysphoria amongst their cycle relative to those fluctuations, I think respecting the fact that like what you're experiencing is very real to you and it's all immersive. Like there's no running from it. There's not a single supplement you can take. It's not as simple as getting a doctor, getting an OB. And like, I mean, like I empathize so heavily. And I mean, like for anyone who has also gone through a chronic system disorder to the extent that it is affecting your daily well-being, I think it's incredibly brave of you to talk about this too. And I think it's very much in line with, you know, being solution oriented to continue to pursue a goal, and a goal in many ways that will make you feel happier and more accomplished despite what it might cost in the moment.
Yeah. So it is, yeah, it is so difficult. I just, like I say, today was literally, I was like, how do you keep going through this? Like, as we're really going in on this, it's like, even from the perspective of like building a business, I know that at this time I can look after my clients. And then it's kind of like anything, like we're trying to start a new clothing brand and stuff like that. And literally choosing like a new bathroom, everything has to get pushed to the side until like my number one priorities are done. Like some days I literally find that, like, obviously my boyfriend is a professional open bodybuilder. A lot of like what I do for him, I do a lot for him basically. And that is a big driver for me and something I like to have control in, because if I don't get up in the morning, I won't get up in the morning for me, I get up for you. So that might sound crazy, but I get up to do the supplements for you, but it's for us. Cook for you, but it's for us. So that's one thing that does really help me, for sure. I did 3 shows though, 3 or maybe 4 actually, last year when I fell like heavy through like PMDD fills. I remember the first one was the Europa, where I placed third, um, which was that was my best placing of the year so far. And I remember Mark saying to me, like, generally questioned whether you would even make it through the day. Like, I had friends and stuff backstage and like whatever, and I found myself having to put headphones on and I just want to tell everyone to fuck off. And that is literally how it is. So I don't become like, so with Mark, like, for example, because he's the person I'm around all the time, I'm not like a dick, excuse my language. So I'm more like, love me. It's more like out, like if someone starts speaking to me, and honestly, I've had this happen. I have just walked away. And I remember one of my friends at a fitness expo was like, why did you just walk away and you left me with this person? And I was like, I don't know. Something in me just went, I can't be here anymore. And I just walked away. So, yeah, that's like, yeah, it's difficult to be honest. 'Cause it's not me. I'm not like that.
Yeah. Well, and to almost feel hostage within your own body based on what your hormones are and what those signals are
Yeah,
dictating, on a regular basis, knowing that those goalposts are always moving. And I want to commend you because this is a component I think listeners can relate to is that, there's good that comes from communicating to those around you when you are struggling, specifically your partner, being able to voice even this morning to him, like, hey, like, I can remove myself so I'm not in your environment, so my emotions don't leach, out to what you're doing. And I very much like, resonate with that because there are times my cycles are pretty intense, and there are
yeah,
about 3 to 4 days where I very much don't feel like myself. And it doesn't matter what leads up to it. If I'm in a great place in life, if I'm not, the lows are just very low. And
yeah,
they're not something I necessarily want to indulge in. But they're also so confronting and in my face that at times it's very much like, today I'm going to do my best, and that's going to look very like vastly different than my other days. And if that means
yeah,
I don't binge and I don't lash out and I don't say things that, I don't actually mean, to me that's I did good today. Like I showed up the way that at least like I could, that I'll be happy with tomorrow, even though that's not the standard I would necessarily hold for myself, at different points in my cycle. But
yeah,
very like it breaks my heart that you are going through this. But I just want to say, like, the fact that you are taking ownership of like the things that you still can control, and I think there's even bravery in being like, you know what, I'm gonna walk out of the gym. Maybe this is what I need. And, maybe there are times where you need to talk to Meg. Maybe there are times where you don't need to talk to Meg, where you're actually going to be better off like just sitting with that feeling. And whether right or wrong, I mean, like, who can really say like, was this the correct thing to do? It's still like, you're doing your best. And I think the fact that you're also
yeah,
honoring like this is actually how you're feeling versus pushing it down and saying like, no, I just need to work harder and I just need to be mentally tougher and I need to listen to more podcasts. It's like, no, like these times are really heavy for you. So I think the fact you can even just own those emotions says a lot about your resilience.
yeah. I think it's one of them, isn't it? Like, life is always will have its ups and downs. And I think knowing that I have this is kind of empowering in a sense. I try and see it in that way, because I'm like, I get through so much, like, I can get through so much, and I know I can. Um, and I know I can do it every month. So even when I'm at the lowest lows, I'm like, ugh, as much as this is draining, like, you can do it. So yeah, I think that's something that definitely does, especially achieving like what I just achieved as well. And even just stepping on stage, if I'm completely honest, like even at the first show where I placed eighth, even at the second show when I placed 12th, before like the third, second, third, like second, first, whatever. It's kind of like I do this to win, but it has having this has made me realize that like there's more to the sport and what it gives me, um, and how it makes me feel, regardless of like the trophies. To be honest, because there's so much more. Like, how would I if I didn't have this sport, this passion, this focus? I wonder what would be and where I would be and how I would be, you know? So yeah, that's something positive to take from it. And the fact that like I can do it and I know I can, as much as sometimes I think I can't. But yeah. And we all go through stuff. That's the thing, isn't there? So there are other people that struggle with other things. And I just try and remember that always.
Absolutely. And when you're working with clients, I guess, how does this translate over to the individuals who maybe aren't experiencing a diagnosis similar to yours, but they are experiencing these fluctuations in self belief, emotional volatility? Maybe it's their first time getting as lean as they need to, or it's their first time in that post show or first time in that build. I'm sure on some level you know you have that embedded, like, hey, like I've been there, right?
Yeah, on so many instances, I can relate to all sorts of things like eating disorders, lack of belief. Last year was like, I think probably the year that I didn't believe in myself, like as much as. But I think it's just trying to instill in people, like through what they do and how they show up, that you can find a little bit of belief because you wouldn't do it otherwise. And I think that's something to like, you know, help people acknowledge and helping them essentially understand like the highs and lows. I think that's the most recent like team call I did, was helping people understand the highs and lows, because I always find it's quite common, like as an online coach, to have people like jack it in because of X has happened and because of Y has happened. And it's always going to happen to us all. It's how we control like the uncontrollables. So I think I've got quite good at like helping people understand, or looking through their sheets if they've messaged me in like a panic and I'm like, right, okay, day 15 of your cycle, right, okay, this could like be having an impact, this what we can do, this where we can go. And I think then the more you can get someone to understand themselves, the greater understanding they have, the greater person they can essentially become. So I think through all of what I've kind of gone through, I've been able to like delve really deep into people, and it's more than just throwing a diet plan, training plan, and just answering one message a day. It's like, message me if you're not okay, letting people know they can do that. So that's something I offer from my own like coaching service, which I know is like, it takes a lot of like work and energy, but it's something that I just believe to be so essential. Every athlete's different. Meg says I'm quite like high maintenance. So I do. I message her like, gosh, I'll be like, I've eaten 50 grams of veg more. Like I will literally message her about anything. But that's just how my brain works and how I've seen myself make so much progress. So I kind of say to my clients, tell me anything and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to track back to something you said, that highlighting and almost bringing it to the client's attention where they are in their cycle. What does this look like in terms of, because I mean, I guess I should frame this a little better. Because of the fluctuations I experience pre-cycle, at 29 and a half, you would think I would have like this like down like clockwork, like, oh, hey, 4 days out, 6 days out, I'm gonna have a sad day, I'm gonna have an angry day, I'm gonna have a day where no matter how lean I am, like I just don't like my body, I want to wear looser clothing, I'm gonna have just a sensitivity across my body. Then one day, really the last 4 days, I'm gonna feel like shit in the gym. Like I'm going to feel like my training is just inadequate no matter how strong I am. I
Yeah.
think having these objectives in place and almost like going into each month for me has been so helpful, and being like, yep, I know. Like I tell my boyfriend, I'm like, today we're having a sappy day. Like I feel really lovey-dovey and all of a sudden it could turn into me just like getting emotional and tearing up for no reason. Like there could not be a
Yeah.
catalyst and that could just happen. And I think one being able to like identify like where in your cycle you're more prone to these fluctuations and really defining a pattern, like when do these happen or when are they more likely to happen, and then what triggering events make these that much worse.
Yeah.
I've found that that's helpful for my clients, and especially in regard to fluctuations in the scale weight, and knowing like, hey, in the case of like what you're describing, it's like 2 weeks out of the month we might have artificial inflations on the scale. And if we can prepare for that, that's going to save us a lot of that mental turmoil that I know for me, like it just would screw up like 2 weeks out of the month. I'd be like, what did I do wrong? And then
Yeah.
every following week, I would see that scale weight come down even quicker. And I'd be like, well, what do you know? It's the same pattern each and every month.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's literally like I think that's literally how I used to be. Like how you just explained as well. Before I started like actually tracking my cycle. And it's something actually like you find across the board. Like I've reached out to other coaches before, spoke to other coaches and seen how the data they track, let's say, and there's nothing on sleep data, there's nothing on like your resting heart rate, which you can see if someone's resting heart rate's elevating around a certain time, is that linked to their cycle? Are they getting on well? Are they run down? Then how do you manage the volume, the training? Like how do you feel each day? Like I think there's so many missing parts to where people just want money in and a transformation. I think it just goes so much deeper than that, especially with even like you say, like tracking your cycle. And then people know now, like I'll literally see it in a check-in. What, like, when they first start with you, you'll track their cycle for a little while, and then you'll find every like day 15 or so they've sent you a message having a meltdown. And then it gets to a point where you can actually explain to them what happens around this time of the month for themselves. And yeah, today we need to go into the gym in a jumper and we just need to just switch off. You're going to feel all right in a few days. And then it's like, okay, we have an understanding as to why the weight's fluxed. So that's fine. The scale's gone up. Now you know why. Like it's all making things make sense. And we're very complex, aren't we, as females? I feel like, I don't know if it's because we speak about it more on social media or because people are more open about it, but I feel like it's definitely a more, how do I say it? Like it's more out there. It's more, people are starting to realize a lot about themselves. I don't know if that's got something to do with society or, going deeper than that, the foods that we eat, the processed foods, the COVID jabs and all sorts that people have, and like all other things that we've had in our lives. I don't know whether it's obviously something like that, but that's another realm that you could explore. But do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the general awareness and the trend in which people are taking more ownership over not just their physique and their physical appearance, but also their internal state. And I think what I've seen in the last, 2 to 3 years of me being, I would say, more so in a position where I am bringing light to female endocrinology within the competitor space, I've seen a vast shift. Like I tell people, like when I started, like when I put out my first video on like Anavar versus Clen, like I knew people were very misinformed about drugs, but I didn't realize how much. And that now has spiraled into something where it's like chronically, like I wish that I had a better conversion rate of people who had success stories with public health providers or frankly even private health providers, but that's not the case. I mean, like every single week I talk to dozens of women who are like, I have worked with this person for 6 months. Here's my dose of testosterone. I have a girl right now. We're on week 2. She wants her provider to manage her hormones. And she's like, hey, I'm just curious, like, do you have a problem with me switching from test probe to test sip? And she's like, we were talking about her dose, and she's like, I'm taking 8 milligrams 3 times a week. And I'm like, under no circumstances do I think that should be your starting dose. And as we're diving deeper into it, I'm like, Yeah, like this is a situation where if you were put on this dose for an extended period of time without your other hormones being managed, which taking a look at her blood work, I'm like, I don't necessarily know if they are. I don't have a reason to believe they're being managed correctly. It's like that is very much the state of finding a more, I would say, progressive or more modern provider who's willing to prescribe for female athletes. But then on top of that, trusting that like they do have your best interest at heart and that they understand the risk profile that comes with some of these therapies. So I think it's fascinating, but specifically on individuals who are struggling, who are not necessarily competitors, but individuals who are struggling with these hormonal fluctuations. It's a shame. Like, I mean, it's a shame. I can speak to here in the States, like, you very much are body shamed if you are too lean and too thin, or even just, let's say, not overweight. If you are under 40 years old, like you go to an OB and say, like, I'm feeling signs of fatigue, you're not necessarily going to be met with a lot of acceptance and a lot of support because of the fact that you're in shape. And that has very much been my experience with providers, is like every time I've gone, oh, well, you're 25, you're 29, like why would you take anything, like your hormones look good. It's like my testosterone was at a 10 nanograms per deciliter when I told a provider I'm literally in stirrups, and I'm like, that's not okay, like that's way too low. And she's like, you're 26, like I like this should bounce back up, like this is technically within range. I'm like, within range starts at like 2 nanograms per deciliter, like that's bullshit. So um
And I think on the flip side, like of that as well, is you're running into like, I've heard it so many times, like people like, I'm on testosterone, and you're like, and they didn't need to be on it in the first place, and things like that, and that is just causing massive issues as well. So it's like on the flip side, it's like, yeah, people do need it, and people aren't realizing that, but also on the flip side of it, you've got people just giving out things left, right, and center, and that doesn't really sit well. And another reason why we took me off of FemTest, because I didn't essentially need it, and that's proof now in all of the blood work that we've even had throughout my contest prep, and now 8 weeks post show, seeing where my testosterone levels are at. And I never took a lot, I did not, but did I need it? And I thought, could that have made everything what I experienced worse? Nothing really has changed since. I can't say that it's made a difference at all, which is annoying. I hoped it kind of would. But yeah, so that's one of them, isn't it?
can we dive a little bit more into FemTest for listeners? Like, what did, I guess, because that was with a previous coach, right?
Yeah, I've just been on it for like when it was kind of like almost in fashion, like,
Yeah, yeah,
to be
it was.
honest. And I thought it was needed for me because um my testosterone range was like slightly below what it could have been at a high end, but we don't always function as well as we do when we are just sitting slightly in the lower. Like, just because we want to be optimal, it doesn't have to be the top range or above.
Yeah,
And mine was just like below, and this person was like, well, we want to be optimal. So I'm like, yeah, I want to be optimal. Like, I didn't really know much about it. Like, to be honest, I have for myself one-to-one like mentoring with Meg, um teaching me about all of this stuff, because I don't know, like, I hands on heart don't know like a lot. I would never put someone on anything without running through everything with Meg, from dietary standpoint to training volume to like absolutely everything, health stats, how long they've been training, like all of, the essentials before that. Like, I've just had a client who's about to start prep, and we did everything based off of her last blood work, but it's still not where it should be, and I'm not going to let her prep. And I think that's something that like doesn't happen across the board. People just prep, and that's not what you want to hear as an athlete. It's really not. But in the grand scheme of things, like, time passes quickly, and if we can get things in an optimal position, your experience is going to be way better. And I think, yeah, that's just something that has definitely gone amiss. And I know it is something that, like, even when I met with another coach and things like that, like last year, the things I was hearing weren't sitting well with me. And I think that's one of the main things as to why, like, I choose to one-to-one with Meg, so she can help me around these things, because I know people are wanting to use assistance, but generally I've turned people down because I'm like, nope, I don't know enough. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in terms of that. Like, I don't know enough. So I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I know X, Y, and Z. I'm going to use someone that's going to help me with this, so we don't run into any problems.
I really commend you on it because, I mean, there are top pros who I've seen what they run for their clients, and it's just egregious. Like, it's completely deplorable to have, amateur competitors at doses that, like, by anyone's definition, are very abusive. For someone that I'm just like, like, I know this athlete, like, I know they're not tracking those data points. I know they're not paying as close attention to this individual as they probably should. And I commend you, definitely on knowing like your limits and what you're comfortable working with, specifically with clients and assistants. I do think, very similarly, more often than not, I am trying to recommend the client to not go down that path unless they're very clear on, what they're willing to do and they have a very firm understanding on the risk profile. But it is a shame, within like our coaching scope is like, okay, well, to have someone begin to work assistance into their programming, even as like basal therapy, even like in the sense of HRT, it's like, well, you still need a baseline understanding of endocrinology, like, just fundamentally to say that, like, hey, this is even remotely in the realm of indicated. But I do agree. I think a lot of girls, they come to me, they think like I'm just going to tell them to take how much Anavar for this long and like keep an eye on them. And same thing with TRT. Like, I mean, like it's very common now for girls to work with me for 12 weeks and be like, I thought we were going to start HRT. And it's like, who told you that? Like, who gave you that impression? Like, your labs are fine. Also, like, you didn't really commit to this phase to begin with. So I'm not motivated to throw in any kind of assistance at this point because, frankly, I don't think you have what it takes to really capitalize on it. And I don't think you're going to be around long enough for me to actually see this out. And I would say that's probably like the bigger challenge I have is when individuals, they want to, like stop into coaching and like, get a drug protocol and then kind of run off and be like, yeah, I just wanted to see like what this was going to be like. And I think like holding really firmly and like you don't need this. Like, what you need to do is focus on levers that have nothing to do with pharmacology or, in this case, PEDs.
100%. And the thing is, there are so many variables that are going to give you so much progress. Like, I work with the majority of natural athletes. I probably have one or two assisted, like, honestly. And the progress I see from my clients is exceptional. I'm not just saying this from a like, come to me like vibe. It is literally because we manage sleep. We track sleep, sorry. We manage their cycle. We manage their training volume. We actually look at the way they're executing movements. All of these things come before that. And I wish I knew that. So I turned pro naturally in 2019, and I went with another coach, someone from Brazil, and what they were asking me to use when I never even used assistance before was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I quizzed a lot of people about it, but it's like, looking now back then, like that me didn't know all the stuff I know now with regards to sleep, nutrition, like eating certain whole foods and like stuff like that. And I just think like it's one of those, people are just writing it down and putting it out there, and yep, you send it off to that one, send it off to that one, send it off to that one, and it's irresponsible. And it really really riles me up,
Yeah.
as you can probably tell.
As it does me, and this is something that like you touched on earlier that I want to come back to is even for yourself, but also for clients, like just because optimal might be a little bit higher doesn't mean we need to push for that. And I love that so much. I respect you so much for saying that too, because like I do have that conversation very regularly where someone's like, I want to use L-carnitine, I want to use insulin, I want to use GH. I have access to all these peptides, like let's throw them in. And I'm like, there seems to be like, more of this, I would say, emphasis on, well, technically, like mechanistically, could we put this in place and like would it benefit you? I mean, sure, it might, but the fact is, like, I don't want you to be running on 10 drugs. Like, I don't want as like a baseline dose of like, hey, let's just get you to stage. It's like there are things that certainly can help expedite the process, but I think this needs to be weighed against, yes, the individual's like potential within the sport and like realistically what do they want to accomplish, what is the likelihood of that happening, but also this is a thing that like within the coaching space is like these are drugs that are being put in place that some are FDA approved, some are currently used, but at the same time like do like should you be in a position where you're not really under the supervision of a medical supervisor under prescription drugs that in many cases can be dangerous or in many cases are just misunderstood or not fully understood.
Yeah, I mean, even when like, you're programming and you're looking at like vitamins and stuff, I'm still like, we need to get blood work done because like you can't just, I don't know, let's give an example, have someone use like if their vitamin B's too high, that's then going to be a negative and stuff like that. So it is a funny it is a funny thing, isn't it? This online coaching. It is.
It is. I think like for listeners, like one of the bigger takeaways I hope that they've gathered from this is like just because something like I don't know, in application in theory like it might make sense and it might help with fat loss, it might help you build muscle, it doesn't mean it's the right answer for you. And specifically for female athletes, I think this needs to be heavily weighted against what is normal for you, because normal could at to a certain extent be dysregulated, and that could be very specific to just the way you've lived your life entirely. So I think working with someone who is specializes specifically in female endocrinology, I think that's going to be your best bet. And maybe that isn't a GP, maybe that's someone who looks a little closer at female athletes or female individuals who are going through some kind of dysregulation or have some degree of dysbiosis. But I think at the end of the day, like just knowing like, is this something that actually needs to be corrected? And if I go about correcting it, what are the potential risks or consequences of doing so if I get it wrong?
And to add to that, I think it's from like my perspective, and given the progress I've made over like the past 2 years, is having making sure that like everything is locked in. So like I'm a coach and want my coach to make sure I'm sleeping for 8 hours, make sure that I'm eating whole foods, um, make sure that I'm resting when I'm meant to. Like all of those little things are essentially what make the biggest progress, whether you're assisted or not. And I think that's something that should be exhausted. And I believe that if your coach isn't making you drink a certain amount of water a day, a certain amount of salt, like all these kind of small things that you may not think about, I just wonder how much detail they're really paying like to everything and your then progression. Like I could not go anywhere else now, because I can't unsee what I've learned through Meg, who is an absolutely fantastic athlete and coach. And I wouldn't be the coach I am without her. I literally, like, we all learn, we do, but I never paid as much detail to all of that kind of stuff before. Sleep, not even for myself, sleep, and that is the thing I harp on about all the time. We go to bed at like 8:30 and wake up at like 5. And like I said, nutrition, from a nutrition standpoint, like I have to mark my adherence every single day. Is it a 10? If it's not, why? What have you done? Have you had more of this? Have you had less of that? Like supplements, like everything. And I just think like if you're someone that's wanting to get to the top, And I always say, like, I'm not a genetically blessed person. Like, I never kind of was. Like, we all have to work for it. I think we all say that, don't we? We're not as genetically blessed or whatever. But I think the work ethic and the little things that you can do around that are super, super powerful. So making sure that all of these variables are in place before absolutely anything else is just essential.
I couldn't agree more. And I think individuals will get so much more out of those levers prior to using assistance, because we all know someone that uses way too much of the wrong things or maybe even the right things. And it's not reflected in their physique. It didn't help
100%.
them
I was
build
thinking
glutes.
that.
They
Yeah.
didn't make significant changes. And it's like, yeah, they were assisted the whole time. So it's like, just keep that in mind. I think for listeners, when you're auditing someone's physique, just because someone made improvements, it doesn't mean they did so naturally, but it also doesn't mean that
Yeah.
those who did make improvements did so correctly. Um, Kerry, this has been great. Let's wrap up. I want you to have a little bit of break before your next episode. Where can people find you for your coaching services, for your social media presence, your content? Where can people follow you at?
First of all, I do want to say a massive thank you. This is probably like, I didn't expect the podcast to kind of go in this avenue. Like, as I said, like, I'm someone that hasn't really openly spoke that much about assistance, but I do think it's important to that people do acknowledge if they head over to my profile, so Kerry Sexton _ IFBB Pro, to realize that, like, I am an assisted athlete. I do everything in my power, like I've spoken about here, from all the variables, and I think that's why I've made the most progress, not because of assistance, but because of absolutely everything that I do around the clock. But yeah, it's something that I've wanted to open up and kind of speak a little bit more on. So thank you for giving me a platform to speak a little bit about that. And yeah, I'm super happy that you've had me on. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Give Carrie a follow. Tune in to the glute transformation. It is astronomical. It's amazing. And all of her content, she's very insightful. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.